Hi, everybody. It's Maggie, and this will be the first recorded office meeting or lecture or whatever the hell you want to call it. I'm not really sure. Um, Basically, what I'll be doing during these things is either being here for people to jump on and ask questions if they have questions and they want a live question, or to, and also to like kind of walk through certain ideas about philosophizing, why philosophizing is important, and those kinds of things. Okay, so basically with the course, there's not going to be a huge discussion component because it's 5 weeks. It's 5 weeks. And what I'm basically going to do is kind of help y'all go through the material and just get the basics of what philosophizing is. I am doing this because I found that in 5-week courses, it's hard enough to help people just get the basics of philosophizing without also bringing in a lot of discussion components where people feel forced to have to communicate with other people. That's a great way to learn, believe me. As you probably could tell from what I wrote in my in that little piece called Getting Philosophy into Your Lexicon, I actually do believe that the best way to do things is actually to show up in a way where show a way where you're actually able to interact with people and talk. So that's one reason what I'm trying to do with the 1 hour every day, that you know when it is. If you're the kind of person who learns that way, this is a good way for you to get on and we can have some discussion or whatever. Otherwise, this will be recorded for other people who can't get on at this time, and it will be recorded so that you can go back and listen to it again if you thought there was something in it that was helpful. So what I'm going to ask today is, I never ask for students to show their face or even talk if they don't want to. I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable, but I do ask that if you're going to be here and you have any questions, please, write some questions in the chat. I will certainly be paying attention to that so that I know if you have questions about the reading or about the course. So what I want to say again, then let me kind of like go back. This sort of thing is much more extempore than if I were, my little shorter messages. So what I want to say about the Cengage Mind Tap is, that's kind of work at your own pace. There are due dates. So it's not something like you can just do everything the first week of class and get it all done. It's not, you can wait until the last week of class to do everything. There are due dates to kind of keep us moving along, but but the material, I think, is straightforward enough that we don't, you should be able to accomplish the things that are set down for you to be done with, in a weekly per week. Don't forget that a week in a 5-week course is the equivalent of 3 weeks. And in order for you to get something out of this course, but not feel like you're, on some sort of horrible Manchurian death march or whatever, I have opted to basically give you one chapter with its readings and its assignments per week. Normally in a regular class, that kind of thing I would do over the course of 2 weeks. But again, in summer, 1 week is 3 weeks. So you're actually going to end up doing less work in these 5 weeks than you would if it was a 15-week course. But it's the same basic concepts and basic ideas. So I do kind of want to make that clear. But again, I don't want to create some sort of a discussion material in a 5-week course. I've had really bad experiences with that, where just trying to get you to get the basic concepts, and then you're writing what really usually end up being fairly blasé discussions just to meet a criteria. So what I want you to do is to focus on the material, come here and just do the things that are assigned in MindTap, and that will be the entire grade. You can watch these if you want to. You don't have to watch them. Now, as someone has asked, what's due today? It's literally just the stuff that you know, gets you into using MindTap. There's like some stuff for how to use Applia and how to use all that. It's got some. It's due by 11:59 tonight. The learning objectives are due by 11:59, and the advocator video, you know, the getting going video is due by tonight. All those have little exercises that you would do, and they're all due by 11:59. Then by Friday, you need to have the reading done so that you can answer some quiz questions and watch the lecture video about Socrates. And then by Sunday, there'll be an Applia assignment as well as an essay assignment that'll be due. And that's the structure of the course. Every Monday through Thursday, except obviously we didn't start on Monday this week. Every Monday through Thursday, I'll meet at 1 o'clock here. I'll answer any questions you have. If you want to email the question to me before 1 o'clock, if you want to jump on and ask a question, if there's something you're doing in the reading that makes no sense to you, that sort of thing, this is a good time to come here. If you actually want to have a back and forth dialogue, I welcome that to a certain extent. That's very helpful, you know, when I have an actual discussion with one of the students. It usually leads to other students understanding a concept a little bit better. So we can do that during this period of time too. Again, this is being recorded so that I can upload it for the folks who can't be here from 1 to 2 o'clock. But now that you know that I'm going to be doing this Monday through Thursday for the next few weeks, you can remember to email me questions you might have if you're not going to be able to be here, and I can directly address those things. Okay. I am in the process today of going through and putting due dates and all the MindTap stuff in Blackboard, you know. So if you go on our left-hand menu and you go down to MindTap, all of the assignments that we're doing are there with links. The ones that have that are going to be graded, they're all there with links so that you can get to them. I'm going to go through and I'm going to put all the due dates on there today so that you see what the due dates are for each one, so you kind of know. But the general structure of the course, besides these 1 to 2 o'clock meetings Monday through Thursday, is going to be the first day of the week. You have learning objectives and the activator video. By Friday of the week, you need to have the readings done so that you can do and watch the lecture video and done its assignment so that you can do the quiz. By Sunday of the week, you will have the Applia assignment due and the essay due. Now, the very last day for this course is actually a Thursday. So the last week, there won't be an essay. Everything will just be due on Thursday, August 6th, because your grades are due Friday, August 7th. Okay, so now at this point, does anybody who's here right now have any other questions? Owner actually already asked one question about what's due today. And again, yes, that is just doing the learning objectives and getting the advocator video done so that you can answer the queries that are in there. But there was also, if I'm not mistaken, there was also like a philosophy toolkit, like that kind of takes you through some activities to show you how to use Cengage MindTap. So that was also due tonight, and you get a small grade for that. Okay. Are there any other questions right now? So I did do a short video this morning. Usually the announcement that I'll send out every morning will be done before noon, and it'll have like anywhere from a 10 to 15-minute video where I just kind of riff on a subject or an idea. Like yesterday, I talked about insecurity versus uncertainty and security versus certainty for a little while. Today I did another video, but it had trouble uploading to YouTube, so I'm going to have to put it up after this one today. But in that one, I'll go over the allegory of the cave for a little bit and why it's important to make a distinction between instruction and education. But really quickly, let me say that, let me make that distinction here again, and that is instruction is building into a person the basic edifice, if you will, necessary for learning to become more productive. Education is actually kind of a process of both enculturation and individuation. Education literally comes from a word, just like instruction means to build in, education comes from a word that means to lead out. And a real education is one that takes your structures that have been built into you and shows you how, one, to personalize them, but two, to move beyond them in case those structures actually could be harmful to freedom, could be harmful to your community, even though your community is the one that's promoting it, right? A good example of this right now might be, there's always a tension between the group and the individual. Always. Throughout the history of humanity, everywhere you look in every culture, there's always this kind of necessary tension between the group and the individual. Okay. In some cultures, you'll find that the group becomes highly dominant. The group becomes highly dominating, or highly, not dominating, but highly more important than the individual. Those are some cultures like ancient China, or even present day China to a certain sense. And then there are cultures in which the individual becomes more important than the group. Oddly enough, for all of the talk of American patriotism by a lot of people in the United States, and about how important the country is and all the rest of it, the individual kind of always overrules the group, or it becomes a kind of fetish or whatever, right? So you can either have societies where the community becomes fetishized to the point that the individual is lost. You can have societies where the individual becomes fetishized to the point that the community becomes less important or gets lost. What we really want in philosophizing about how to live together, about how to sort of enter into some kind of mutual struggle that's beneficial to all parties, is to figure out how to keep that tension between group and individual from becoming dominated either by the group or by, I'm the only thing that matters and the group can go to hell. So what we're doing and asking about philosophizing, actually, in this sort of process of getting started with philosophizing, pardon me while I sit down, is we're entering into a place where we're asking ourselves, what kind of instruction have we received as a society, as people in a society? In what way does that instruction encourage us to actually work against the benefit of society so long as we're individually successful? In what ways does that instruction sometimes attempt to get us to put our individual survival into a situation where we don't care about the society at all? I think I just kind of lost my train of thought, but the idea, I suppose, how much have you really questioned the things that you take for granted and that you believe to be the case? I'm not sure that our instructional system does a very good job of getting us ready for education. And although we use that term education all the time, if we actually mean by education being led out of ignorance, being led out of the dark, being led out of, you know, what causes us to sort of not have a full grip, then I think that we're actually talking about actually having what's called an educational system that works against actually leading you out. My own criticisms of the educational system that I've been in my whole life, because I'm, you know, 55 years old. I have worked, with the exception of 6 years of my life between graduation from high school and going back to college, I have been in school my whole life in some fashion, right? So I know this system really well, and in many ways, it is unparalleled in what it's capable of accomplishing with instruction. The real question becomes, is it actually an educational system? Is it a system that really gives you the tools to fully become critical and move beyond structures that you might be able to look on and realize that's problematic? That doesn't make any sense. For instance, everybody has to take science classes. But if you really think about the way that science has been weakened, one way that science has been weakened is something that we listen to and kind of follow the advice of. One way that it's been weakened is, first, in the 70s, people began to actively work to undermine biology and its insistence on evolutionary theory. That's a beginning place. Okay, you don't have to believe in evolution, but I do think that there's enough scientific evidence to demonstrate that life evolves and that life has evolved. Now, did it evolve like Darwin said it evolved? No, I'm not absolutely sure about that. Did it evolve the way Richard Dawkins thinks that it evolved? I'm not absolutely sure about that. One place where you get the sort of philosophical educational notion that you have to be critical is, I think you can see that there is a process of evolution through time of life, but we don't really have the pattern or the system down as to actually how it works. So we sort of actually think about it still more in terms of the way, you know, humans are able to husband animals. You can actually watch the evolution of dogs just in the lives of like 10 dogs that you breed a certain way. So we kind of get in this idea that it has to happen through a sort of intelligent design, or it has to have a designer behind it so that it's going somewhere. When in reality, we also know you can get some really beautiful dogs if you just let dogs wander around and they end up, you know, mating with each other, and they're from different species, and you end up with a really pretty dog, and it doesn't have anything to do with, you know, with the intelligent aspect of it, with the purposeful design. Life just happens, right? But if you've weakened science to the degree of saying, despite the fact that biologists have studied this their entire careers, and we have 2 centuries now of evolutionary theoretical work, that's just a theory, and it's not a fact. That's problematic, right? Could they be wrong? Sure, they could be very wrong. Are they wrong? Well, making a religious plea to say God created the world and it didn't happen through evolution, that doesn't actually stop the science. That just says, well, I just refuse to believe what scientists have accomplished in all of their studies. Well, if you do that, if you've already begun to do that, if you've already begun to say, I can choose through my religious beliefs or my political beliefs to determine that a scientific conclusion is wrong, then you've set up the entire structure that we're watching right now, as some people refuse to wear masks, some people refuse to social distance, some people refuse to listen to anybody about what's going on. They don't want to listen to epidemiologists that have studied epidemics and studied diseases for decades, and they don't want to believe what they're saying. Part of that is a distrust in government, but part of it is also the idea that it doesn't matter that a scientist has spent decades studying something. If you choose through some cultural commitment, that's an instructional commitment, through some family commitment or cultural commitment or political commitment or religious commitment, you decide, well, I can just ignore what any scientist says about something that can be empirically demonstrated. That gets to the point of how education in our education system can become utterly failed, right? Let me say, I do not believe that just because science shows through a lot of empirical research that some kind of evolution must be in the pattern of life, some evolutionary process. That doesn't mean science has said God doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that science has demonstrated that there's no purpose to the universe. That just means that science cannot see or understand life except in this evolutionary kind of term, as it evolves, as it transforms, as it changes, as it moves from one kind of life to another kind of life, from one degree of life to another degree of life. A lot of people, like Richard Dawkins, want to say, well, there's no God because evolution. That's also BS, right? So science doesn't get to trump religion, but religion also doesn't get to trump science. They're in different fields of knowledge. They're in different fields of understanding and comprehension. So, this is kind of the situation we find ourselves in. Are there any other questions before I go forward here? It's real easy for me to just blather, and I don't want to leave it out if you have a question about philosophy or something like that. If you're having an issue, let me just stop for a second and say, if you're having an issue with Cengage and its technical issue, something like that, you need to talk to them about it, because I actually have no control over a lot of stuff. If you're having an issue, I want to reiterate, if you're having an issue about Blackboard, I can't do anything about that either. So this is kind of the weird situation we find ourselves in with having to do an online course, having to do, this kind of learning activity, instructional activity. Okay. So if nobody who's here has a question, I guess I'll just kind of keep going. Philosophizing is, in a sense, something that we do which becomes a methodical way of thinking, but it's also something human beings do spontaneously. My teacher's teacher, Carl Jaspers, said that there are a number of ways that people spontaneously philosophize. Now, spontaneous philosophizing is like the wonder of a child, right? We all know that children, just once they get into that mode of why, it can become very aggravating. But the point, of course, is that these kids are not just being instructed, as they're literally, through their wonder, they're educating, leading themselves out of having no knowledge to having the base knowledge necessary for instruction, having a basic relationship with other people and with the world, right? And that's through wonder. That's through marvel at things that you've never seen before and you want to know about. Another way that humans sort of spontaneously philosophize or get into some kind of thinkering that's sustained is through making judgments. Every time you make judgments, you literally are, right, making a balance between two things, comparing and contrasting and evaluating and deciding that this is more important than this, or that this is just and that is unjust, right? So the question there would be, you want your judgment. So if all human beings are make judgments, that is a philosophical, spontaneous philosophical endeavor. Now, that can be done sloppily. It can be done ignorantly. It can be done really well. Some people may have a natural talent for making judgments. But the point there is that to judge, to evaluate, is already to begin the process of critique. Methodical critique is one of the things that philosophy does as a method, as a system, as a way of life. Okay. Another place that you see this sort of spontaneous philosophizing might be in the way that well, people who are neurodivergent is what we call it now. People who are different in their mental state than most people, right? A person who has some sort of neurological or psychological issue that causes them to see the world in a way different from the majority of people. Those people, excuse me, those people are not irrational. That's the first thing. Jaspers, again, was a psychiatrist, a medical doctor who specialized in psychiatry, particularly in the diagnosis of psychological issues, psychiatric issues. He was not only a psychiatrist, he was a philosopher, and he melded this being a scientist and being a philosopher together really well. And one of the ways that he made kind of a mark as a thinker is he said, when you talk to a person who is, we would say now, neurodivergent, or you talk to a person who has psychological issues, especially severe ones like schizophrenia or paranoia, or even mania, there is a kind of knee-jerk reaction to say that person is irrational, meaning they have no reason, especially if they've gone totally over in what we would think of as that person's out of control because they're harming themselves and other people and they don't seem right. And so our thought is they become almost animalistic, or they become irrational in the sense they don't have human reason. But really what's going on there is they don't participate too much in the commonly held structures of everybody else, but they're actually reasoning a lot. I've had a lot of experience with students and friends who have had mental breaks, and I can affirm Jasper's point, which is when a person has a break, they don't become irrational, they become hyper-rational. They have a reason for saying and doing the things they do. Now, we may not agree with the reason. We may think that's, bonkers, what? But the point is, they never act without reasoning through. Their reason is simply not a conclusion we would make. And a lot of times that's based on their own metaphysical commitments. So here we're already at a spot where some of these notions that we're learning about, epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge, metaphysics, which is the theory of reality, many people who are neurodivergent have a highly complicated metaphysics. It's one of the things that makes them more paranoid, right? Is because they think that they've seen through the structure. I don't know, maybe they have, and they're, and so they put forward sometimes very elaborate rational structures that they think everything works off of. You see this also in OCD, in depression, in a whole host of other things. So one of the problems the human mind has is just as children have wonder, and just as we all have to make judgments and evaluations, we have this power constantly going on inside of us, and we're always more engaged with the world rationally than we realize we are. Even feelings, which people will often say, you need to separate your feelings from the facts, or you need to separate your feelings from your reason. Actually, your feelings are rational. if a feeling or an emotion was utterly irrational, you wouldn't even know what you're feeling or emoting, right? The very fact that there are words for anger, joy, sadness, bereavement, the fact that there are these names for all these things is the idea that what is going on, anything that a human does is always open to reason, is always open to being understood, even if not completely understood, right? So that's another one. And another place where um, you see kind of philosophizing saved or kept alive. And all of our tales, all of our myths, all of our narratives, all of our proverbs, they hide within them, or not, and sometimes they're not even hidden, they hide within them morals and philosophical judgments that need to be passed on from generation to generation, right? So the proverbs in the Bible, or the Psalms in the Bible, or some of the parables of Jesus, the parables of Buddha, the teachings of Buddha, all of these kind of things that become very indicative of our, our sociocultural heritage, contain philosophical elements, ways that people in other cultures have tried to save an idea that they thought was absolutely crucial, right? So one way that we do that is we tend to write things a lot. In the old days, even when Socrates was alive, people learned things more by memorizing them than by writing them out and going back to them, right? So on the one hand, you'd have sacred proverbs and ideas. These would be passed on from person to person. On the other hand, you'd have scripture, right? So the stuff would be written down. One of the things Plato does is he saves Socrates as someone worthy of being heeded and listened to, and he creates all these dialogues that we can now go back to and read. And there's a lot of really cool ideas in there. But you can see these ideas too in the Gospel of John or the Gospel of Luke, or you can see them in the Dharmapada of the Buddhists, or the Tao Te Ching of China. So this idea of when you come across something that's smart and important for the community as well as the person, you want to save it and put it somewhere. So you have these kinds of ways that we have philosophy in our life every day. The child's wonder, anytime we make a judgment. The person who might appear irrational, but actually is coming up with very rationalized structures of the way the world is formed. And then, of course, our proverbs and our myths and our narratives. Now, the difference that to be drawn there is between spontaneous philosophizing that sort of rises up out of being human and is captured both by the individual, right, and the group. And then there's methodical philosophizing. And that's really what we're looking at more when we take a philosophy course. It's to point out the fact that all of us are very philosophical if we just give ourselves a chance. Philosophy is for every person, but it needs to move out of the spontaneity of the child's wonder, or that moment you have to make a judgment, or that moment that the neurodivergent, decides that the angels of history have come to take them away, or whatever. All of these kinds of spontaneity things, they have to be refined. So we say with Plato, philosophy begins in wonder. And when you get older and you're going back and you're judging methodically how you've been instructed, how your society norms and your family norms have been built into who you are, and you go back and you want to test those things the way any building should always be tested regularly to see, is it in good shape? That requires method, discipline, and resoluteness. Method, discipline, and resoluteness. That's the difference between these sort of everyday ways that we philosophize and get into a kind of thinkering, and then this sort of methodical, critical engagement where we use judgment and imagination and memory and conceptualization and experience to sort of examine where we find ourselves and what we are. In your in your readings, you have nice examples, especially from Plato and different aspects of Plato, about what the nature of philosophy is. I think, you know, I talk in my short video, and I'm going to get off here in just a minute since my short video is actually conducive to where we're going now, and I'll get that uploaded for everybody with the allegory of the cave. But what I want to talk about now is one little point in Plato where Socrates says, basically, this is in the Phaedo, which is the death of Socrates, when he drinks the hemlock and dies. Plato has Socrates say that we philosophize in order to know how to die. So we're born into a world, we build ourselves up, we allow the people who love and care for us to build around us certain securities, certain certainties, sorry, word choice, given certainties. And then at some point, if we're going to be fully adults, fully human, we have to examine the structures that have been built into and around us. And we have to methodically critique so that we make sure that we're not just living in the shadows and that we're not just merely existing until we die, right? Well, that's a lot of heavy shit. I think this is a good place to stop. Tomorrow, when I come on, I'm going to talk to y'all about what you might call the sources of philosophizing from the human condition. If y'all have any questions that come up from your reading today, then you can email them to me, or you can pop on tomorrow and put them in the chat, or actually, you know, just have a dialogue with me if you want to. But yeah, let's think about this. Let's think about the human condition, that we have these powers that we begin to make use of and spontaneously utilize, that we can take any of these and refine them into a methodical, disciplined, and resolute thinking, right? And that can help us then determine the best way forward so that we live a thriving, flourishing life, and we're not just merely surviving, merely existing, from birth to death, right? Death, our life only has meaning when we live purposefully. I'm not saying a purpose-filled life, like some people make use of it, that the purpose has been given to you from outside. That's not a philosophical way of thinking about things. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about living on purpose and not just being tossed around by all the things that are happening to you. Okay, so we'll pick up from there tomorrow. If you have any questions that pop into your head after this, after watching this, or after being here, you can email me and I'll, arrange them in a way that'll make sense for a talk tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll also just pick up where I'm leaving off on the sources of philosophizing in the human condition. Okay. Thank you very much for joining today. Those who are able to be here, maybe I'll see y'all tomorrow. And again, if you got any questions, just email me. Otherwise, stick to the reading material and the quiz material and the assignments, okay? We're going to at least build some philosophical structures for you to make use of, if not fully engage in an educational leading out this semester, okay? Thank you. Bye-bye.